Welcome to the GoOutLiving Attitude, a cancer survivor's journey through health and wellness, helping others search for the tools to bring us a healthier and happier lifestyle. Hi everybody, Jonathan Brandt, GoOutLiving. Today's special guest, we have Susan Brady, who is a physical therapist, integrative health practitioner, bone health expert with over 30 plus years of experience, and soon to be author. I believe the book's coming out real soon. Welcome to the show, Susan. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me today. I'm very excited to be here with you today.
Well, we were talking right before we came on, and I think what you're doing is extremely important. But I thought we'd start with kind of your story and how you got into going from physical therapy to more of the integrative health practitioner part of it.
So I started my career as a physical therapist over 30 years ago. And early on, I worked in a rheumatology practice for a rheumatologist. And so many of the patients there, they were dealing with significant, musculoskeletal pain and inflammation and swollen joints and chronic health issues. And I remember this one patient in particular, and she would come in for regular treatment. She would get temporary relief, but nothing I did seemed to give her long-term improvement. And so she stopped coming in. And then one day after I hadn't seen her for a while, she came back to see the doctor. And, I worked in the doctor's office, and I saw her in the hallway, and I asked her how she was doing. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so much better." And I said, "That's great." I said, "What was your turning point?" Because it obviously wasn't the physical therapy. And she said that she'd figured out on her own that when she removed wheat and sugar from her diet, her pain and swelling improved. And then when she ate those food again, all the symptoms came back. So you have to understand, this was back in the early 1990s, I think in 1990 to be exact. And people were not really talking much about the connection between the food we ate and how we felt physically. And that experience honestly changed the direction of my career. That led me to begin exploring integrative health and nutrition, which, I went and got a doctor of integrative medicine. And that really opened my eyes up to not only how food influences our health, but our sleep, stress, exercise, lifestyle. All of these different things influence not only our musculoskeletal health, but our overall wellness. And so it just really opened up my eyes to just taking a more holistic approach to healthcare. And then when I eventually started my own practice in nutrition and integrative health, I was inundated with women with osteoporosis. They were coming in searching for kind of a more natural, comprehensive approach to building bones. And at that point, I was kind of a jack of all trades, did everything. And obviously knew a lot about osteoporosis from the musculoskeletal point of view, but not really that much from the integrative health point of view. So I dove into all the research, and I identified what I considered 5 key pillars of bone health. And that became the foundation of what I call my BONES method. And BONES is an acronym. B is balanced nutrition, O, optimize gut health, N, nurture the soul, E, essential exercise, and S, smart supplementation. So that is really the framework that I've been using for the last 15 years to help women better understand their bone health and help them support their bone health in more of a holistic way.
Well, and a lot of that sounds like it's also looking at core issues where bone health is just another connection to, like you said, gut health and overall holistic approach to everything is finding that core issue.
Yes,
And in the end, they all go together.
they do. They all have to support each other. And, no cell is an island of its own in the body. Every cell interacts with every other cell, every other tissue in the body. And I think a lot of people, just look at their bones as the frame that holds them up. But your bones are constantly, they are living tissue, and they are interacting with every tissue in the body. So, you do have to look at them as part of the body as a whole. And the thing is that everything that I talk about and want my women and men doing to improve their bone health is going to improve their overall health as well.
100%. I mean, it reminds me of when I was a CNA or surgical technologist and how many elderly folks would come in with broken hips, for instance.
Mhm,
And again, yeah, bones are brittle, but that was just underlying, fact of, overall health was just struggling at that point.
mhm.
So you really hitting that bone health is so important. Now, when I think of bone health, everything that we've been taught is drink more milk. I mean, honestly, that's really because, like you even said, back in the 90s, we didn't talk about food. And I've always said for the last 50 years, we've kind of missed the mark on that entire process, and we're paying the price now.
Mhm,
So I understand you have your pillars,
mhm.
but can you explain how the foods we've been eating are affecting bones in general right now, in that we're probably really not strengthening them?
So, one of the issues is, as you probably know, our food is not as nutritious now as it used to be, right? Because of modern farming practices, so much of our soil is depleted. And I think that I saw a study, and again, this was probably 20 years ago, where they looked at the amount, I think, of vitamin C in broccoli 20 years ago, so in the early 2000s, to the amount of vitamin C in broccoli in the 1960s and 70s, and it was like 50% more in the 70s. And I think that is a big problem because our body runs on these nutrients, and where are we supposed to get these nutrients is from our food. And I'm very much a food first person. And so many times people will say, "Well, what supplements? What supplements? What supplements?" And I have to explain to them that supplements are just that. They are to supplement where you're not getting the nutrition from. And food is the way that our body was designed to extract nutrients. And so many of these supplements, we don't even know if we can extract the nutrients from these supplements. And I remember sitting in a lecture one time, and the professor was saying that he had a patient, and the patient had a colostomy bag, and his supplement was coming out the same way it was going in into the bag. So he wasn't even benefiting from it at all. So I think that's one thing we have to understand is that unfortunately, our modern farming practices, um, we've depleted nutrients. And then on top of that, I think our modern day lifestyle with so much stress in our lives, cause us to burn through nutrients so much quicker. So we actually need more than I think that we used to need. And then the toxins. I mean, our environment is inundated with toxins, and these toxins put additional stress on our body, particularly our liver, trying to constantly detox the body. And so that can drive more nutrient depletion as well. So there's just so many more things these days that cause nutrient depletion. And then again, on top of that, our food is not providing us with the nutrients that we need. And then if we want to, throw in the gut, um, you could eat the best diet in the whole world, but if you cannot digest properly and extract those nutrients from the food that you're eating and then absorb them, you're not getting these nutrients to any cell in the body, let alone your bone cells. So, and it's funny, you talked about calcium, and yes, your bones need calcium for sure. It's part of the scaffolding of that inner structure. But the truth is, your bones need over 20 different nutrients to stay strong and healthy. And if all you're doing is taking 1,200 milligrams of, some of the calcium out there is literally chalk. Calcium carbonate is chalk. And if you're thinking that you're taking 1,200 milligrams of calcium and that's all you need for your bones, that's just not true.
No, and I understand completely on the gut health part because I lost 6 inches of my colon over the summer because of all the side effects of the cancer. And yeah, trying to get the nutrients I need has been really difficult because they also tell me I have no gut lining. But what I'm seeing with other people is the inflammation part of it is really creeping in, and arthritis. My goodness. I mean, I know so many people that just have the pain that is constant. And I don't know if it feels like we're not looking at, again, the core issue of what's causing that inflammation in general.
Hmm. And I think you really hit on it. In regards to osteoporosis and bone health, inflammation drives bone loss. It actually stimulates those cells that break down bone. And so, where does the primary place where we develop inflammation is in the gut. And once you have that inflammation in the gut, then it allows inflammation to then get into the bloodstream itself and create this chronic inflammation. And when you talked about arthritis, and when I worked physical therapy, and I did up to 2 years ago, I was still working physical therapy. We see so many of these joint replacements these days, the hip replacements and the knee replacements. And I was always baffled because you hear about arthritis being wear and tear, right? Well, the people that were getting the joint replacements weren't even the weekend warriors. They were the people that sat behind a desk all day and unfortunately ate junk food and were overweight and had an unhealthy lifestyle. They weren't the athletes. They weren't even the weekend warriors. They were sedentary people. And it really did open my eyes to what is causing their arthritis to the point where they need a joint replacement. And it certainly was inflammation, but it wasn't inflammation that stemmed from activity. Physical exercise can cause inflammation in the joints, but they weren't doing the physical exercise. So the inflammation was coming from somewhere else, most likely from eating a higher inflammatory diet, as well as then having poor gut health.
I mean, I hate to say it, but it's misinformation that we've been getting for so long. I mean, and that goes back to the processed foods, ultra processed. I mean, just everything for the last, like you said, 20, 30, 40 years.
Hmm.
That's what's causing all these issues. And then you throw in, okay, now you have arthritis or you have bone pain in some way. Guess what? You don't want to get out there and work out or even walk. So again, it just builds on each other.
Does. It snowballs.
It
It does.
does. So okay, you get a lot of women coming in with these conditions. What is your first step with them? Is it straight to the nutrition?
No. So I have a pretty comprehensive health history. So my initial consult is 90 minutes long. And I'll be honest, it usually goes to 120 minutes. And I don't really even put it, I'm not going, oh, you got 1 minute left. I don't work that way. I want to take the time it takes to get as much information from this person so that I can help them in the best way that I possibly can. But we take this 90 to 120 minutes and go through the entire health history. I want to know everything that's happened. I want to know all their surgeries. I want to know all their medications, what supplements they're taking. I have them do a 5-day dietary intake so I can look to see, are they getting enough protein? How much calcium are they getting in their diet? Are they getting enough nutrients from the fruits and vegetables that they're eating? So I want to look at all of that. I want to know what they're doing for exercise. I want to know their stress levels. I want to know if they're sleeping, because if someone's not sleeping, I don't care if they could live the healthiest lifestyle there is, but it's at nighttime that our body has to have that downtime to, I call it house clean. They've got to get all the toxins and the old cells out of the body, and they have to renew itself at night. And if you're not getting quality sleep, you cannot renew your body every night. So when I look at all that information together, and then also gut health, so I give them a digestive health questionnaire. And so then I say, okay, what is the priority here? What is the first thing that we need to look at. And so that could be sleep, it could be stress, it could be digestive health, it could be nutrition. And, I look at it almost like peeling an onion. Okay, what's the most glaring problem? All right, let's address that problem first. Peel that outer edge of the off the onion. Now, what do we have left? Okay, so then this is what we do next. This is what we do next. You can't fix everything at once. It's too overwhelming to somebody. And, they're just going to throw up their hands and say, I can't do this. And then what have I done for them? I've overwhelmed them. And that's the last thing I want to do, right? So I like to take a very stepwise procedure. And I think that's where I kind of put on my science hat. I like cause and effect. I want to change this. Are they better, worse, or the same? Right? If they're worse, then I got to look at something else. If they're better, great. Let's capitalize on that. And then when that issue has resolved, all right, what's next? What's the next thing we have to look at? So it's not about just giving somebody calcium and vitamin D, telling them to go to the gym and, go away. um, it's really about, working with them and their issues and their, um, putting together a personalized plan for them, because everybody is different. And it's so funny because I do have a program, that's a 7-week program. It's very general. And it took me so long to put that together because it's just not the way I work. I feel like I have to individualize everything I do. And I think that's kind of where conventional medicine fails us sometimes. It just, this is the protocol, this is what we do, without taking in, a person's whole history and, what's going to work for them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you go into the doctor's office, it's a 10-minute call or 10 minutes with them, and they already know what they're gonna say, "Take this pill," or whatever, and you're walking out the door. And that's not saying they're bad people or anything like that. That's just how that world revolves right now.
Unfortunately, yes, it
W
does.
What I love about what you're doing is it's not just one thing, and I think that's what people are starting to understand when we look at alternatives, and I hate to even say the word alternative because a lot of it's been around forever, uh, but, functional medicine, integrative medicine, everything you're doing is, again, getting to that core issue, talking it out, and probably making them understand this is gonna be a long journey. I mean, it took you a long time to get there. It's
Mhm.
gonna take you a long time to see real progress.
It does. And, the thing about osteoporosis, which I personally find frustrating, is it's not like weight loss where you step on the scale and, 2 weeks, a month, you see the scale go down. So you know that what you're doing is working. With osteoporosis, you get DEXA scans every 2 years. So you have to keep people motivated to stay on track. And then I'll be completely honest with you, osteoporosis is very hard to reverse. And in my opinion, stabilizing the bone loss and preventing further bone loss is a victory. So, and here's the thing is so many times, again, in my opinion, osteoporosis actually starts in adolescence because it's during the adolescent years that we build bone. And by the age of 26, 28, you're going to build the most bone you ever will have in your life. And so if you are sick or you don't exercise or you smoke or you drink as an adolescent, you never reach that peak bone mass. So now when you're going through menopause in women, where you get that decline in estrogen, which spurs the bone loss, because estrogen for most of a woman's life is what's protecting her bones. So if you haven't reached that peak bone mass and you're starting at a place down here, as soon as that estrogen decline occurs, boom, you're into osteoporosis. So, but you can't go backwards. And so you do what you can with the information that you're given, and just take it from there. But again, I think, just even stabilizing the bone loss is important. And I'll just add this too. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a big fan of DEXA scans because they only look at density, and density is only part of the equation, because you could have very dense bone, but the quality or the inner structure of that bone could be poor and weak, and you could fall and fracture. Or you could have less dense bone, but the bone you have is of great quality and strength and fall and not fracture. So there are some newer tests coming out these days that look at bone quality opposed to bone density. And I think that those tests have some validity to them, because I have seen in my own practice people, I'll just give you an example. A 50-year-old woman who only had osteopenia, which is just the start of bone loss, sedentary lifestyle, very stressed, poor diet, broke 4 bones in 1 year. Then on the flip side, a 75-year-old woman who had full-blown osteoporosis, took great care of herself. She fell down a set of stairs and never broke a bone. And you would think it would have been the flip, right? But so it just shows you that, I'm just not convinced the DEXA scans are giving us the information that we need.
Well, and that kind of goes back to, like you said, how we're living, but it's catching up with younger and younger people, really. And
Yes,
that's
it
what really
is.
scares me. And that's what a
Mm-hmm,
lot of what I mean, Christy was in her 40s. I'm
mm-hmm,
only 51, and we both dealt with really bad cancers on
exactly.
top of all the other side effects that went along with it. And we're seeing that with everybody, women, men, younger and younger, getting these like serious issues.
Mm-hmm,
So when you talk about bone health, yeah, it's starting really young at this point. Can
it
you
is.
talk a little bit about the hormonal side? Because I know we mentioned that earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think people even understand how big hormones are affecting all this as well.
Yes. And so, like I said, for women, estrogen protects our bones, and for men, testosterone protects our bones as well. And I have to say, one of the greatest things that's happened, I believe, in the last several years is taking that black box warning off of these hormone replacements. And, that there was so much negative press about putting women on hormones, that went back to that study done in the early 2000s, which was a flawed study. And so now I think putting women on hormones, not, you know, and it's funny because we're not replacing their hormones, we're just supporting their hormones. And I think it can make such a huge difference in protecting their bones, in their brain health, in their heart health, in their overall vitality. But I'm going to be honest with you. I think one of the things that I think is disappointing me in the area of this hormone therapy is I see women being put on um, estrogen and progesterone, but not testosterone. And women do make a small amount of testosterone, and all of these hormones have to be balanced. And so when we're just putting them on estrogen and progesterone, I think we're missing something very, very important, and that is the testosterone. And one of the things that's so important as we age is maintaining muscle mass. And, we see this in studies all over the place now, how aging with vitality is dependent on muscle and, resistance training. And your bones follow your muscles, right? So the stronger your muscles are, the stronger your bones are going to be. And the same thing, if you have what we call sarcopenia or low muscle mass, you will automatically have low bone mass. I mean, because the bones are absolutely dependent on the muscles. And what helps to keep our muscles strong is testosterone. And so I do think that, I love the fact that we're starting to introduce hormones a little bit more, but I do think we also need to be introducing testosterone as part of that plan.
Do you find that we are getting better with the educational part? Because it really does come down to that. When we look at everything we just discussed, it's really education.
And I think people are becoming more educated. I think that people, how do I say this without insulting anybody? I think for the long time we looked at doctors as God. Whatever they said, was what we did. And I think with the more functional medicine, integrative medicine, alternative medicine, people are starting to, and I also think the invention of the internet, which can be good and bad, but there's so much more information out there. And so people's eyes are open to things beyond medication. And so, yes, I think with all of these influencers out there on social media and alike, there's some, we're trying to educate the public that, for instance, with osteoporosis, it's so much more than a prescription medication and calcium and vitamin D. And so I do think, I believe that we are trying to educate people more and more. And I think people want that education because I'm not sure that people want just, you have this diagnosis, here's this prescription.
Well, and I think again, when we're talking about the younger and younger generations seeing, again, these horrible things happening to their parents even, they're starting to look ahead and go, "Okay, I gotta learn about this." And again, that's what we're doing here.
Mm,
We don't know it all, but guess what? We there's there's other things out there than the doctor, and a lot of us went through that side of it, and we
mm-hmm,
found out it was not exactly what we thought it would be.
mm-hmm,
So, again, it's just getting the word out, and then, yeah, you gotta find out for yourself because everybody's an individual anyway. Um, but I
absolutely.
love what you're doing, I really do. But
Thank you.
before we get going, I wanna talk about the book. So, The
Yeah.
Gut-Bone Connection.
Yes. So, gut health was always part of my, my bones method approach. And I'm going to be completely honest. At the beginning, it was a small part of it, right? But as I became more and more aware of how important the gut was, I started to introduce it a little bit more. Because I started seeing women that were doing everything right. They were exercising, they were eating a great diet, they were doing everything right and still losing bone. And if you think about it, you could eat the best diet in the whole world, but if you're not digesting and assimilating those nutrients, what does it matter? And that's where the gut comes in. And when I talk about the gut, I'm talking about the whole digestive tract from, mouth to stomach to small intestine to large intestine. And it starts with being able to make enough digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid to actually break down your food. And the hydrochloric acid that we make in our stomach also helps to cleave off those minerals, the calcium, the magnesium, the iron, so that your body can absorb them. So if you're someone that has had GERD and reflux and are taking, possibly, acid lowering medications, you have a more difficult time getting those nutrients into the body. And then in terms of the gut, your gut also helps with digestion. The bacteria in your gut actually produce nutrients that is critical for your bones. So some B vitamins as well as vitamin K2. Your healthy gut produces those nutrients. And then a healthy gut produces all of these amazing compounds like short chain fatty acids and all of these things that then go on to support every aspect of your health. And then as well, making sure you have a good gut lining, because if you have something called dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of kind of the good and bad bacteria in the gut, it can create inflammation in the gut, which can then create leaky gut. And when you have leaky gut, then, these things that aren't supposed to be crossing that barrier, because if you think about it, the digestive tract is outside of the body, right? It's a tube. And that intestinal lining is very selective as to what comes into the body and what stays out. But when it falls apart, now you're getting things coming into the body, and the body's looking at these things going, I don't know what this is, attack. And it creates inflammation. So the gut is so important. And, we've talked about, for years now, the gut brain connection and all of that. And it's so interesting. I mean, in my book, I have over 300 peer reviewed research papers that connect the gut and the bones. So it's not something, that I'm making up by any means. I mean, the the information is out there, and people are talking about nutrition and bone health and exercise and bone health and supplements and bone health, but nobody's talking about the connection between the gut and the bones. And I think that that's a really, really important piece of the puzzle that we need to start addressing.
I agree 100%. I really do. Uh, when is it coming out?
Hopefully, September 1st.
Okay, perfect. Well, what I always do, I always put out a blog post that'll go with it, and I'll make sure I mention that in there. Is
Awesome.
the gut bone connection.
Mhm.
Susan Brady, absolute pleasure. Physical therapist, integrative health practitioner, and bone health expert, 30 plus years. It was an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Jonathan, and I'm honored to take this time to talk with you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. All right, everybody. As you know, thank you all for listening. And as we continue our health and wellness journeys, find the attitude, keep the attitude, go out living. Bye, everybody.